welcome to the state finalists for Prepared Public Speaking. I will give a couple of instructions and then we'll go ahead and get started. I apologize for the slight delay. Hey, it's not bad, only 30 seconds over. Would ask that nobody leave or enter. I know I'll be back there so nobody comes in. Nobody leave when absolutely no talking during the presentation or question period. Question period is for the 3 judges only to ask questions, interact with the speaker. Any questions from the audience before we get started?
After a speaker is done, that is our time.
After the questions are done, that's your time to exit if you'd like to leave at that time. Thank you, Mr. Gear. Okay, I will bring in your first speaker. Our first speaker today is Dixon-Phillips from Lyons FFA chapter.
Are all judges ready? When you picture where the cucumber you ate for lunch came from, what do you picture? Is it a green field in the sunlight with a gentle breeze blowing through it? What if I told you it was grown in an old bomb bunker? This is possible with underground farming. The Foundation for Economic Education once reported that development is currently taking up farmland, forest, and open space at twice the rate in this decade of the 1980s. Between 1992 and 97, some 16 million acres went to development. As the population on Earth continues to grow, the need for space grows as well. The trend of people moving from more rural areas to urban spaces, urban development continues to skyrocket. More and more farmland is being taken up by the cities that rely on the crops that they grow. If the Earth has only so much space to give, what's the solution to this problem? Underground farming allows producers to grow crops in some pretty unusual places. These can be old bomb bunkers, abandoned mine shafts, basement living complexes, and the list continues to grow. Underground farming is humanity's solution to diminishing farmland. Today, we'll head downstairs and we'll look at the problem of diminishing farmland. Then, we'll shine some light on the advantages of this unique farming style. And finally, we'll pull some weeds as we look at the disadvantages of underground farming. So let's head downstairs and look at the advantages. Let's head downstairs and look at the problem of diminishing farmland. Urban development is not the only threat to the Earth's soil. The Guardian put out a report on the nation's farmland. Nearly 33% of adequate or high-quality food-producing land has been lost at a rate that far outstrips natural processes to replenish them. The University of Sheffield's Grantham Center for Sustainable Futures, which undertook this study by analyzing various pieces of research published over the past decade, said the loss was catastrophic, and the trend near irreversible if modern agricultural practices do not change. That article was published on December 2nd, 2015. That was over 5 years ago. Let's face it, we need a solution to this mounting problem. And although there are many options, one option is becoming more viable than vertical farming. Underground farming is a practice that allows producers to grow fruits and vegetables and any other crops that lend themselves to being grown hydroponically. Producers control the amount of wind, sunlight, and water their crops receive. Now that we understand what underground farming is, we have to understand why it's becoming such a popular alternative. Underground farming is becoming such a popular alternative due to controlled climates, urbanization resistance, and natural restoration. Due to these farms being located underground, you can place them virtually anywhere. Weather conditions, as well as surrounding environments, no longer have an effect on crop production, which you all can agree is pretty nice, especially in a turbulent state like Kansas. Growing underground, a company based in London, who's been working on growing crops out of old bomb bunkers, interviewed an employee, and he had the following to say. We're not affected by the verities of climate change. It's all very predictable, very controlled. no frost and no heat waves down here. It's all very standardized," said Greg Crawford, whose job it is to trial and develop new crops and to look over the health of the plants. You see, being able to grow crops not just out of space but out of season allows us to have fresher and higher quality food. It allows us to have fruits and vegetables in their off seasons without the need for shipping them from somewhere else. It not just allows us to move beyond season restrictions, but space restrictions as a whole. There are only so many rooftops and areas for vertical farming, yet when you dig underground, those limitations virtually don't exist. Underground farming company Green Forges explains this opportunity. Every time a plot of land is set aside for residential or commercial development, it often comes at the loss of farmland, which will never go back to producing crops. But if we were to implement Green Forges units into these developments, the plot of land would serve both purposes, help bring about some of the calories required by the inhabitants. It would also remove the need to clear land somewhere else for lost agricultural capacity. Let's face it, urban development won't stop anytime soon. So if we can make our buildings able to grow crops, it helps to mitigate the issue of diminishing farmland, and it also helps bring fresh food to those in the city. And finally, the last reason why underground farming is more comparable than traditional farming is natural restoration. Farming has changed the landscape of the United States for the better. But one drawback of that is that the natural land where those farms lay on being changed. With more underground farms, there's a chance for more diminished fields to return to their natural states. As science direct states, damaged or abandoned fields undergo natural succession and restoration, or passive restoration, possibly towards their pre-disturbance vegetation. These would not only make those damaged fields worthwhile again, it would also bring natural beauty back to the area where they once lay. Now that we shed some light on the advantages of underground farming, we have to look at the disadvantages of underground farming. Those happen to come in the form of crop capacity and energy cost. The kind of crops grown in underground farms require special tending, such as helping them self-pollinate. Another issue that comes with them is that they're mostly limited to fruits and vegetables, not your larger crops like wheat, corn, soy, etc. Although this is an issue that should be talked about, there's an argument that it could be useful. The larger fields left can be used to grow the larger crops, while our everyday food items can be grown in these hydroponic units. Another issue is energy cost. This is unfortunately true. Harnessing the power of the sun requires a bunch of energy. But the switch to cleaner energy, such as solar and wind, should help mitigate this issue. Another thing, logically, if you think about it, people will be spending less money on fruits and vegetables, which means they have more money saved to put towards energy costs. So, overall, farming needs to change as a whole. And although there are many solutions out there, finding the best one is a way to suit both producer and consumer the best. Today, we headed downstairs, and we looked at the issue of diminishing farmland. Then we shined some light on the advantages of this unique farming style. Then we pulled some weeds as we looked at the disadvantages of underground farming. Underground farming is not an underground concept anymore. Perhaps it's time we all go back to our roots in more ways than one. We need to dig deep into the depths of our creativity to let new opportunities bloom. Thank you.
Great job. We have just a few questions for you. With water resources being a major pain point in many states, how efficient are underground farms in water usage when you compare it to traditional methods?
So it depends on which area of the United States you're talking about. If you were to put these hydroponic units, of course they are mainly powered on water. If you were to put them in more water-starved states, it would be more of a draw. But if you were to put them into water-heavy states, they would be about comparable to your average farm. It all depends on what farming style and what irrigation method those areas are using on whether it will be comparable or not.
All right, so much of the U.S. doesn't actually have the ability to dig basements or underground bunkers. And so when you consider that, or even here in Kansas, when there are often places where the rock is so strong it takes explosives to get it dug out, or there may be issues with the effects of that. What would you say to those individuals in those areas? How can they implement your plan?
What I'd say to those areas and the individuals is that you don't have to dig super deep underground if you can dig at all, but if you couldn't dig at all, I would recommend maybe looking into where you have an abandoned building, such as abandoned highway tunnels, where you have places that aren't being used anymore. Maybe you have an old bomb shelter that is built above ground. All those places can be used to put underground farms in, and they're actually being used in other countries across the world, like in Korea, where they're using abandoned buildings instead of digging into the ground. So to those people in those areas, I would say, don't give up on it. Just find another place to put it.
So when you're talking about this, I come from a manufacturing background. Where do you think the probable place for these hydroponic units would be built, and do you think that the supplies are available if there was a mass buy-in to this movement?
Yeah, so I would recommend you put them in larger urban cities if you can place them there. Any state that has large abandoned mine shafts, such as Kansas, where we have a lot of mine shaft that isn't being used right now, we could place them there. And like I said, there is actually an underground farming company called Green Forges, which is working on putting all these units into new places. So there are companies and startups out there that are hoping and developing time to do this right now. So I believe that people would be able to get them. The supplies are there. These are hydroponic units, and hydroponics has been on the rise in the couple of past years as people are looking into it. So the supplies are there, the locations are there, and I really recommend putting them anywhere you have the space. The more places where we can put these farms helps mitigate the issue of all of our farmland starting to become degraded over time.
Is there any concern for employee safety? It seems a little dangerous to put farming in abandoned mine shafts. Can you talk a little bit about the employee safety aspect?
Sure. So employee safety, of course, is the biggest concern, and abandoned mine shafts I don't believe have been used as of currently, but there of course be precautions to be taken. These units would be placed and housed in a special container. Like there'd be a large unit around them, and then you have the units inside. So I'm sure those units would be built to help withstand some of the issues of the surrounding areas. So employee safety would have to be something new, as you develop them and continue to go. It's since it is a new farming thing, employee safety is of course a priority. And so right now I'm sure that as many times as they put them in, they'll make sure that it's safe enough for employees to be in there.
So you mentioned the use of solar power and alternative energy sources.
Mhm.
We're seeing now with the expansion of solar farms, the need for surface level farming for that. We're also seeing extreme erosion come from a lot of those facilities. So do you foresee that to actually be an answerable solution to powering your underground farms?
I believe that not just solar, but perhaps wind and water energy as well. As we switch to cleaner energy sources, as much as those can also be drawbacks, it is drawing less on our fossil fuels. And that's mainly what I'm focused on when it comes to these underground farms, focusing less on those fossil fuels. But also, if you have a farm underground in a residential building, you can put a solar panel on top of that residential building and help power the whole building. Green Forges also...
That's fine.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.